Почитувана амбасадорка, ви благодарам што дојдовте во овој подкаст на Македонската американска алумни асоциација. Овој подкаст е уште еден од серијата подкасти кои се однесуваат на борбата против корупција. Наменет е пред се за младите и целта е со овој подкаст да ги мотивираме преку овие разговори да добијат сознанија за борбата против корупцијата, меѓутоа и да ги мотивираме да останат тука, да веруваат во институциите и да си ја сакаат својата земја секако. Со оглед на тоа што темата е сепак борба против корупција и корупцијата во Македонија, неизбежни ќе бидат некои прашања кои се однесуваат на големи корупцијски скандали во земјата.
Well, first of all, let me start by saying how delighted I am to be with you here today, Snezhana, and you and I have known each other for a long time, and this is our first podcast together, so I'm really excited about this. And I'm especially excited to be doing this as a MAAA podcast. Our Alumni Association is just such a valuable partner to the U.S. Embassy, and as I've said before, and it's true, is really a global model. Because the alumni, including you and Zorica, are people who have remained active after participating in programs, have looked at issues that are important in the country, like the fight against corruption, and said, I'm going to continue to work. I'm going to continue to take the lessons that I've learned and try to make the country better for it and to make the region and the world better for it. So I'm really thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for including me. And I think as we dig into corruption, I think this is a conversation that could probably go on for hours and hours, but I look forward to your guidance on where we take the conversation.
Благодарам многу. Јас морам само да кажам, благодарение на програмата од МАА, јас повраќањето од Америка всушност станав новинар кој многу длабоко навлезе во истражувачкото новинарство. Пример ми беа многу американски програми. И се уште ме држи тој ентузијазам. Дека можеме да направиме нешто. Добро, неизбежно прашање кога станува збор за корупцијата кај нас е, може да кажам дека Македонија е можеби рекордер по официјални личности или битни политичари кои што потоцна се гонети или имаат истраги за корупција. Имаме еден премиер на црната листа, имаме двајца вице-премиери, имаме градоначалник, имаме бизнисмени, навистина еден така голем политички естаблишмент. И тоа говори дека корупцијата е кај луѓето со белите крагни, оние што се во политиката. Дали се должи тоа на слабиот политички естаблишмент дека се тие лесно коруптивни или на неказнивоста во ова општество кое за жал неказнивоста трае доста време?
I think that's such an interesting way to look at it, is sort of the така наречен white collar corruption. And there's certainly many examples of that. But I would ask the listeners and the viewers to consider how they define corruption. Because I think how we look at corruption and where we see corruption can be quite different. And so one of the things that I would urge people to think about is that corruption is not only something that happens with very prominent individuals. And I think we all know that corruption can be a former premier, it can be a mayor, it can be a politician, it can be an oligarch, but it can also be a doctor in a hospital or a nurse who says, you cannot get an appointment for an operation unless you pass me an envelope of money. Or it could be a teacher who says, your child will not pass these exams unless I get some money. And one of the things that I find so interesting talking to not just journalists and politicians, but as I travel around the country, talking to people trying to live their everyday lives, is that people are touched by corruption every single day. And many of the times, it's those smaller examples of how that affects them. And I think when I and others have called corruption in this country a cancer, it is because it is not just limited to one part of the national body. It is something that has spread throughout. And so in order to really fight corruption, I think it's helpful to take a broader view and to take a more holistic view of how very, very large, significant corruption actually feeds into some of the smaller things that we see as well.
Да, ама кога ги кажувате овие примери, морам да кажам дека луѓето во Македонија мислат дека треба некому да му понудат пари, на докторот, на шалтер во администрација. Тоа веќе стана навика, обичај, за жал. И луѓето практично очекуваат дека некој ќе им побара пари. Од таму ли го добивате тој впечаток? Веќе менталитет стана во Македонија.
And I think that's something that, and maybe that's what we can make our shared New Year's resolution for 2025. Because, especially since we're talking largely to young people, I would say speak up and say, this is not what I want for my country. This is not what I want to do. And what it takes is enough people saying to the doctor or the nurse or the teacher or whomever, I'm not going to be a part of it. I just won't do it, because there has to be, and I am not saying that it is the fault of the person who is trying to get surgery for their mother. I'm not saying it's the fault of a mother or a father, because, if my mother were ill, would I do everything I possibly could? I believe I would, but would I stop short of paying for something under the table? I hope so, but I recognize that these are very, very difficult issues, and there has to be a consensus within a community that none of them are going to take it anymore, that all of us together are stronger than just me as one mom or daughter to say, we got to stop this. It's enough, because then you can go for some of the bigger players, and it's a process where people across the country can say, we deserve better. We deserve to get the services for our families that we are told we are allowed to have.
Сепак, најголемо разочарување за македонските граѓани е неказнивоста на оние што се корумпирани со бели јаки, како што кажавме. Последно е бегството на Артан Груби, откако тој се најде на црна листа и него распише и меѓународна потерница и за други случаи, не само заради оној некој што се најде на црната листа. Дали мислите дека овие бегства, оти претходно избега и Груевски на многу лесен начин кога СДСМ беше на власт, дали мислите дека овие се политички договорени бегства, зашто за мене е неверојатно да ти избега туку така некој што е под истрага?
Yeah, it's a great question. And look, one of the important things, and we've talked about this, is the fact that when we designate somebody under our various sanction laws, or the so-called blacklist, this is because of U.S. law. We're required to do this, and it's a responsibility that we at the embassy and I personally take very seriously. And it's a very, very careful process. And I think amongst the most interesting conversations that I have are on this topic exactly. So, the United States makes this announcement that somebody is designated under whichever category and whichever department of the U.S. government this person is designated. And then what happens? I don't know. I don't have any idea where Artan Grubi is.
Извинете, ја мислам дека е во Албанија.
Rumors. And if there's one thing that this country does very, very well, it's rumors. But I honestly don't know. And frankly, I think it's a little irrelevant, but generally speaking, people don't run away if they have nothing to hide. And so I think that what I hope is for, exactly as you say, accountability, to take responsibility. And if you have done nothing wrong, and this applies to anybody who has been sanctioned, or indeed who is under any kind of a judicial process in this country, if you have nothing to hide, then come back and prove that. There is a legal process here. And part of that has begun with Mr. Gruby in terms of various charges that have been made against him. And again, if there is nothing to hide, and I know that there are those who talk a lot about, and I know it to be true, influence within the judiciary, that can be an issue. But the people of this country want to see that the process is happening. They want to understand what the process is and why certain things are being done. And the best way to win back confidence of the public here is to have an open process. And that includes someone who is accused of certain crimes to come back and, as we say, face the music.
Ама не е само Артан Груби во бегство.
Yep.
Во бегство е директор на лотарија, директор на електростопанство, водачи на криминални групи од Рачиново или Грчец или други места. Се е тоа сепак благодарение на некој што бил внатре во системот и им кажал дека ќе има акција против нив. Последен пример е истрага што се води против син на поранешен заменик министер за внатрешни работи. Зачудува фактот како е можно системот толку да не функционира. Вие сте американските истражители дали и тој дел го истражуваат. Неказливоста доаѓа од истите бегаат зашто некој им кажува.
No, that's really important because there is a process, and every part of a case of both law enforcement and the judiciary at every stage has to do their job. So you start out with investigators, police investigators, or financial police in whichever case in some of these instances. And then you have warrants for arrest and searches. And then you have, you either take the person into custody or not. And then it goes to investigators and the prosecutors and then to the courts. And something that I recognize is not always popular is the fact that in the United States as well, this process can take time. And I am somebody who, one of my worst traits is that I'm very impatient. Everyone in my family will tell you that. When I believe something to be true or when I've made a decision, I want things to happen very quickly. But many of these processes do not happen quickly. And what is important is, again, getting to what the citizens think about these processes is that they understand. That they understand it went from a police search and seizure or arrest, that now the investigators are doing their job, that the prosecutors are gathering their case, and then when it moves into the court, that those lawyers and judges will also do their jobs. And frankly, if there's one thing that I think would be helpful is for those branches of the judiciary to communicate better about what's happening and to be more transparent. And we've had many conversations with judges, prosecutors, attorneys, defense attorneys, all of those within the process. And I understand some evidence is confidential and cannot be shared, but share the information publicly that you can under the law so that people know it hasn't just died away. Because too often, I think, people believe there is an arrest or an allegation and then nothing happens. And if they don't see that there's action, then people don't know that there's follow-up. So sometimes for people who are like me and who are impatient, it's helpful to let them know that it is moving forward. Now, I hope that that is the case with all of the cases that you discussed, because people want to know that those within this area of their government are doing their jobs.
Меѓутоа, зошто мора да дојдат американски истражители кои истражуваат лица за црната листа, па ние како јавност да дознаеме дека имало случај на судија и вице-премиер за корупција и за подкуп. Мене ме чуди што податоците ги земаат истражителите од Македонија, од македонските истражни органи. Зарем нашите истражители не знаеле ништо и одеднаш гледаме некој е на црна листа за нешто. А тука во Македонија тоа воопшто не се истражувало. Тука е најголемото разочарување кога ќе видите дека треба некој од надвор да дојде за да го истражи случајот.
Well, and I've been asked that quite a bit. And as you know, the process that we go through, this is not a courtroom process. When somebody is designated by the United States, it wasn't a court case that took place in Washington, D.C. It is a process of our embassy here, and this happens at embassies around the world, working together to provide information and develop a case with our colleagues in Washington, at the State Department, at the Treasury Department, at the Department of Commerce, to put together something that meets our legal requirements. And the bar is very high. That is also a process that takes time. So it is a very careful process. Cases are reviewed very thoroughly to make sure that they meet our legal requirements. And so when somebody's name is officially designated, when that announcement is made, I can assure you that the process has been thorough. It wasn't an accident. And it's not politically driven. It's not driven by political timing. None of those things. It is when Washington has completed their process, they make the announcement. Now, what happens from after that is a different question. And I know there are those who are talking about reintroducing the law on restrictive measures, re-examining that again. But, you know, as I've said before, the evidence is here. And much of it is, not all of it, but much of it is. And it's possible to put together a case from what is available here and in the immediate region. And so is it our hope at the embassy that that happens? It is. But it is also, we're not in law enforcement. So I'm not going to be kicking anybody's door down. But it's a, you know, I hope that this helps spur some action. And I have to say, this most recent designation does seem to have created quite a reaction. And I think that's a good thing, because people want those who have been in power to be held accountable.
Едно лично прашање. Кажав уште на почетокот дека се вице-премиери, политичари, бизнисмени. Често пати сте биле во друштво со нив, дури морало изјави да даваат во ваше присуство. Дури ветувале благосостојба на државата, а во исто време вие лично можеби сте знаеле дека се под истрага за корупција. Како се чувствувате во такви моменти, кога знаете дека тој што е до вас, македонскиот политичар, лаже, дека се бори против корупцијата, а тој всушност е под истрага?
You know, in many instances, I have known from the beginning, because I understood many of these cases took us quite a long time to make sure that we had all of the evidence. I have been very aware of when people are lying to my face. And it's too bad, but it is, then I know not to believe much of what they say. And I have been asked in a similar vein, why did you go to events with these people? Why are you seen with these people? Because I'm the American ambassador. Because when we interact with the government, when I was here before, I interacted with Nikola Goreski. And Sasha Myalkov. And so I don't stop doing my job because I believe that somebody is lying to me. And it's the nature of how we interact. And it also does not drive timing. I've been asked the question of, did you wait until the previous government was out before announcing this sanction? Absolutely not. If Washington had the case ready when they were still in power, then we would have announced it then.
Дали вие рековте дека во едно интервју дека не сте биле изненадени што Артан Груби се најде на црната листа. Дали би биле изненадени или не би биле изненадени ако видиме и некои актуелни политичари, па рековте може да бидат и од други професии, не само во политиката. Или ние дали би биле изненадени ако има некои нови. Дали знаете сега нешто? Кои би биле следни? Кои би биле следни? Тоа сите ги интересира.
That would be a great story. Sure. I mean, again, we work on these cases for a while. And in fact, our fantastic team at the embassy, our justice team, they work very, very hard and very carefully and frankly, with a great deal of integrity to make sure that what we are discussing with Washington is very careful and very thorough. This is not something that you want to make a mistake on. So I have never, either in this country or anywhere else where I have served, been surprised by an announcement because in every case we have known for quite some time it was coming. But no, I'm not going to tell you.
Нема да ми кажете. Добро, ќе чекаме. Она што беше интересно, кога се избра и првиот човек на обвинителството за борба против организиран криминал, амбасадата даде еден интересен коментар за неговиот избор. И до ден денеска јас лично чувствувам дека ова обвинителство не работи доволно добро и брзо во однос на предмети. Дали вие мислите дека се уште има, можеби, вие не рековте дека има политичко влијание, јас велам големо политичко влијание во обвинителствата и затоа не може да ги покрена случаите. Знаете зошто? 2% од населението нема доверба во правосудството, истиот процент од 2% нема доверба во политичките партии. А тие имаат симбиоза некако.
Well, I think, I am not aware personally of direct pressure from the prosecutors. But again, I think this goes to wouldn't it help us all if we knew what they were working on? If you as a journalist are not doing any journalism and you're not reporting, then people are going to say, what is Snezhana doing?
Ќе ме заборават.
Yeah. and why are we paying her? Though you work very hard, and I certainly know that. And so part of it is to help people understand that it doesn't look as though someone is just avoiding their job. It's very easy to think that if there's silence coming out. And this goes back to letting people know what's happening, letting people know this is a very complicated case. And because we don't want to get it wrong, we are being very, very careful, and we are asking for more evidence. And that's fair. That happens in the United States all the time. But if there's a question about somebody who is, for example, making a case kind of disappear, which we've certainly seen, until it expires or meets some statute of limitations, then I think it's very fair to ask those questions. I don't know in this particular instance what the details are, but within the framework of protection of privileged information, I think it really would be helpful for people to be informed about, we've required more evidence from the investigators. We've actually found, and this happens in the US all the time, we started to investigate one aspect of it and we unearthed a whole different. And so, yes, maybe there is even more that's there, but I think the citizens would love to know that.
Journalists.
And journalists, so that it's not just, as we say, radio silence.
Имаме и други тела кои истражуваат корупција, Државниот завод за ревизија, кој има извештај како поидовна точка, Државната комисија за борба против корупција. Меѓутоа, морам да признам, последниот состав, дури имавме и конфронтација, ние истражувачките новинари со дел од нивните членови во однос на судир на интереси и следејќи ја нивната работа, доста критики упатувавме. Дали имате надеж дека овој состав можеби ќе поработи посилно? Ова ве прашувам во ситуација каде што во државата можеби луѓето немаат доверба во судството и во обвинителството. Ако добро работи државниот ревизор, ако државната корупција, спречување корупција е добра, тогаш барем има надеж дека нешто ќе се помести.
Well, there's, I do appreciate that there is information that's privileged in the judiciary. And candidly, I think the relationship between journalists and the judiciary in almost every country can be a little tense sometimes, because you're just doing your job. And I think it's fair and, in fact, critically important for you and your colleagues to do that, to do just that, to ask the hard questions. And sometimes they're not going to give you the answer that you're looking for. But I think it is very important that those questions are asked. And then if there's a reason for why, whether it's the State Committee on Corruption or any of these organizations, to say that's not something I can share with you if it's privileged information, but to provide an explanation when at all possible. Because what doesn't work, again, is the silence. Or what is even more problematic is because somebody, a journalist or a member of the public even, has asked the question, that they then are targeted for some form of abuse or criticism. We should be able, and again, this is a point I would make to those young people listening and watching, is that it's kind of your job. It's a citizen's responsibility to ask hard questions. People are in these positions because it's public trust. And if you don't trust them, then ask the hard questions. And if we sort of say, well, I'll be frustrated by it, but I'm not going to ask the hard questions, then that's also, as a member of the public, sort of abdicating our role as well.
После сето ова што го разговаравме, факт е дека на младите треба да им дадеме и надеж во оваа држава дека ништо ќе се промени. Меѓутоа, еве како да останат во земјава, тоа е прашање што сите немачи. Оти според мене проценките се дека еден дел сакаат да работат во администрација, другите сакаат да си заминат од државата, трето нема. Не можеме се уште да ја најдеме формулата како да ги задржиме овде. Дали еве вие имате некое можеби американско искуство, сосема друга демократија и држава, меѓутоа начин и порака до овие луѓе.
I think that I've been thinking about this question a lot lately, because if you don't have hope, then it's really difficult to see your way forward on anything. And if there's one thing that I hope for the new year, and I truly, really do, is that that young people especially recognize that they really are the future of the country. It's not just something that old people like me say to try to make them feel better, because it's actually quite a huge responsibility. But it's their country, and I hope that they speak up. And I hope they have a voice. And I travel all around this country and talk to groups of students, high school and university students. And young people in this country are smart, they are talented, they ask really good, hard questions, of me anyway. And I think that with the future in their hands, then it is bright. But they have to do that. And I think I really, truly believe they can make a difference. And there are opportunities for them, and certainly exchange programs with the United States. But so many others. There's lots of EU programs. There's others around the region, but there are also lots of opportunities right here to participate in making communities around this country stronger, safer, cleaner, and more successful. And I really believe they have a role, and I hope they take it.
Јас сум од постарата генерација и за овие 30 години многу се сменија, дојдоа и млади политичари, дојдоа млади суди, млади обвинители, меѓутоа никако да почне таа акција и затоа ми е малце, се уште сум скептик кога ќе го притиснеме копчето да има акција и да се ресетира овој систем.
Well, part of the challenge is that I really love New Year's because it gives you a chance, first of all, to reflect on the previous year, and to reflect on things that I could have done better, and then what can I do in the new year to kind of fix some of those things that I wish I had done differently. And it's a real opportunity to say, okay, 2025, here we come. I'm going to focus on these things. I really do want to make a difference in my community. I went yesterday to a dog shelter, and there were many volunteers. And so many people, and from different NGOs and organizations as well, not only helping dogs, but helping kids with learning disabilities, with these other challenges. And it was an absolutely beautiful event because there were people from all generations, but especially a lot of young people who were there because they want to make their communities stronger and they want to help people. And part of helping people is addressing the problem of stray dogs, frankly, in this around this country. So I am heartened by that because there are people like you and like so many of your friends and colleagues in MAAA who want to make a difference. And it's harder to do it all by yourself, but there is a community out there. And so, I would say find your community. Find the people who share your concerns because they're there. And then do something. Let's do something. And we will be there to help.
Како пример за младите генерации и како жена, пред се сакам да ве прашам, што ве држи се уште во дипломатијата и како вие лично одговарате доколку имате притисоци? Секоја професија има притисоци, не велам дека се политички.
Well, it's interesting because speaking personally, look, we all have challenges, right? We all face different challenges in whatever our profession, whatever our personal lives, and they're all unique to us. And I have to say that also I have been asked quite a bit over my career questions like, what's it like to be a female diplomat? Well, I don't know because I don't know what it's like to be a male diplomat. And so I think what's so important is for each one of us in whatever our current situation is to figure out how to make the most of it. And I believe that is possible. I believe that around us, we all have the tools that we can ask for help, which is really important. When there's a problem that I cannot solve, I have a fantastic embassy full of people who I can say, I need your help on this, and they will be there. And I know that that is true of MAAA as well. And so I think we take from this, last year had its challenges. It had some great highs, some lows, and how do we move forward? That is always the question for me, of how do we make tomorrow brighter?
Господи амбасадор, ви благодарам многу за овој подкаст и ви посакувам успешна пред се здравје во 2025 година.
Thank you. Среќна нова година.
Среќна нека. Благодарам.